Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a stack of source materials that detail a true crime narrative that takes us far from, the secure walls of a courtroom and throws us right onto the unforgiving vastness of the open sea.
It's a really chilling one.
It really is. This is the story of Isabella Hellmann, a vibrant life tragically cut short, and the investigation that proved her disappearance was not some tragic maritime accident, but a calculated, deliberate act.
It is perhaps one of the clearest examples we have of a surface narrative. The story told by the only survivor being just utterly and meticulously dismantled by cold, hard forensic evidence.
Exactly.
We were talking about the disappearance of Isabella Hellman in May of 2017 and the just astonishing contrast between her husband Louis Bennett's account of being awakened by a crash and the undeniable truth found in the wreckage of their honeymoon vessel.
And that's our mission today, right? To unpack these contradictions for you, the listener, and really try to understand how intent was proven when there were no witnesses.
Absolutely no witnesses, just the evidence the sea gave back.
So, to really get the gravity of what was lost, we have to start with who Isabella Hellman was. At 41 years old, she was the epitome of the American dream realized.
She really was. She had come from Colombia, became a naturalized American citizen, and had built this successful, thriving career as a real estate agent in Delray Beach, Florida. Just a powerhouse.
A total powerhouse. And she was a cornerstone of her community and her family. Her parents, Eduardo Rodriguez and Amparo Alvarez, they lived right nearby in Boca Raton, and so did her three sisters.
And that tight-knit structure was absolutely central to her life. You can see it in all the reports. It was especially important after the birth of her daughter. Her greatest joy, and the source material really emphasizes this, was her 10-month-old daughter, Amelia.
That support structure was so critical. Her mother, Amparo, was heavily involved in childcare, which gave Isabella, as a successful working single mother, just this immense peace of mind.
And her professional life was also on this huge upward trajectory. We know her broker at Signature Real Estate, Ben Shakar, he recognized her outgoing, determined personality. It's a great story, actually. She apparently approached him for a job while he was still working as a bank teller.
That says so much about her. She was stable, too. She owned her own condominium on Anita Drive, valued at around $170,000. She was dedicated, successful, and had this fiercely protective family network.
Everything was stable, successful, and centered around two things: Amelia and Florida. And that stability, that's the anchor against which all the subsequent turbulence and tragedy really has to be measured.
Right. And now, into this successful, focused life steps Louis Bennett.
Louis Bennett. He was 42, a mining engineer, a very experienced sailor, and he held dual UK and Australian citizenship. They met online in 2014.
And things moved incredibly fast. Breathtakingly fast. Amelia arrived in July 2016, and they were married just a few months later, in February 2017.
A quick marriage, a new baby. It's the outwardly perfect coupling.
But the sources make it crystal clear that the outward appearance was a very, very fragile facade. Beneath the surface of this new little family unit were these enormous, crushing pressures.
And those pressures are what investigators identified as the critical motivation for everything that followed.
Okay, let's unpack this. The first major crack was financial. Despite both of them being professionals, the couple was under constant financial strain.
And we aren't talking about minor inconveniences here. This was a steady, constant drip of pressure. They owed over $2,500 in various debts, and they were actively struggling with credit card payments.
That kind of debt, especially when you have a new child, that introduces a tremendous amount of stress into any marriage, let alone one that was so rushed.
For sure. But the money issues were really only part of a far more fundamental and, critically, an unresolvable disagreement about their future.
And that disagreement centered on Amelia and where they would live.
Exactly. Bennett was adamant. He wanted to raise Amelia in Australia. He cited business interests and proximity to his family.
But Isabella was just as adamant that she would not leave Florida. She had built her entire life there. Her parents, her sisters, that was her essential support system. You don't just leave that.
No. And this creates a completely intractable problem. It's a total impasse. Neither one was willing to compromise on the future of their child or their geography. It was a power struggle.
And the recovered text messages, which, as you know, are so often the silent witnesses to a crime, they reveal just how toxic this atmosphere had really become.
Very devastating to read.
Those quotes are truly heartbreaking because they just show a woman trapped in this cycle of emotional abuse. Isabella wrote these specific messages to Bennett, and they reveal the depth of the conflict. One reads, "You make me crazy, shouting, yelling, swearing."
And then another one, which just speaks volumes about the constant erosion of her self-worth. She says, "I'm tired of you telling me I'm the most worst person you ever met before. Everything I do, it's wrong." This is very pathetic, Louis. This wasn't just, typical marital bickering. This was a deep-seated antagonism established by him, and it was focused on dismantling Isabella's confidence.
You're right. That level of conflict, it establishes a critical motive. Bennett saw the relationship as a cage, basically. It was preventing him from getting what he wanted. A return to Australia with his daughter and full control of the finances.
And yet, despite this extreme strife, they set off on a belated honeymoon cruise in April 2017. They flew to St. Martin to board Bennett's 37-foot catamaran, the surf into summer.
The itinerary itself, it sounds so adventurous, right? St.
Yeah.
Martin to Puerto Rico, then Cuba, ending in Key West. Maybe it was a final desperate attempt to reset things.
Maybe. Or maybe something else entirely. They left their 10-month-old daughter Amelia with Isabella's family, which, given Isabella's fierce dedication to her, that implies a real trust in the trip's safety and its duration.
It's the journey itself, though, specifically the communication, that starts to feel sinister when we move into the next phase. The timeline of their final voyage, coupled with Bennett's deliberate omissions about safety equipment. It immediately flags the beginning of a calculated plan.
Yeah, the red flags start popping up almost immediately. The first one, on communication, Isabella's personal mobile phone broke early in the trip.
Which seems minor, but it's not.
It's not minor at all. That one detail meant that all communication with her family, with the outside world, was funneled entirely through Bennett's devices. He gained complete control over the narrative and all contact.
And the FBI drew a deeper, much more damning conclusion from his use, or I guess his non-use, of the emergency equipment. Bennett was not a novice sailor.
Not even close. He held a Royal Yachting Association Coastal Skipper certification. You don't get that without extensive training in seamanship, emergency protocols, man-overboard procedures, all of it.
So as a coastal skipper, he's professionally trained to operate a vessel in coastal waters. He can handle navigation, weather, emergencies.
Exactly. And this is crucial. It means his subsequent actions were not born of panic or ignorance. They were born of choice.
And yet, investigators discovered that Bennett did not activate the satellite phone or register his personal locator beacon, his PLB, until they reached Cuba.
The final, most exposed, and longest leg of their journey back to Key West.
Can we just pause on the PLB for a second? Because its function is so vital to understanding how calculated this all was.
Yeah, let's do that. A personal locator beacon, a PLB, is an emergency device. It's designed to transmit a distress signal and your precise GPS coordinates instantly to a search and rescue authority, usually via satellite.
And you register it before a voyage, right?
Always. By delaying its activation until Cuba, Bennett essentially controlled the emergency window. He decided when the safety net went live.
The implication then, as investigators saw it, was that he wanted to ensure his own rescue and survival after the deed was done.
That's the theory. If the equipment had been registered earlier, a distress signal could have been accidentally triggered, or maybe the vessel's movements might have been tracked more closely. He delayed the readiness of the emergency response until he was sure he would need it for himself alone.
It creates this just chilling contrast. Here's a professional sailor, and he's prioritizing the logistics of his post-incident survival over the ongoing, proactive safety of his own wife and their vessel.
It's premeditation in action.
So the last known communication from Isabella, it happened on May 14th, 2017, as they were departing Havana, Cuba, on their way to Florida.
It was brief.
Very brief. At 8:25 p.m., Isabella called her sister Diana using the satellite phone, which Bennett had finally connected. She confirmed, "We just connected the phone." And then her last words to her sister were, "I'll see you tomorrow."
I'll see you tomorrow. That 8:25 p.m. call, it establishes her safety, her consciousness, her expectation of seeing her family the next day. It's the final checkpoint before everything goes dark. And before Bennett's account begins. His official story claims that shortly after that call, though the timing is a bit murky given the 8:25 p.m. call around 8 p.m., he asked Isabella to take the night watch while he went below deck to sleep.
Okay, and this is where his expert sailor status completely fractures his credibility. The open ocean, particularly that stretch between Cuba and Florida, is not a place for a novice sailor with, quote, limited sailing experience to be in sole command of the night watch.
No way. And even more damning, he admitted he did not require her to wear any safety equipment.
No life jacket.
No safety harness.
No personal locator beacon. Given his training, that's not an oversight. That is a calculated removal of any and every safety net.
As a coastal skipper, Bennett would have been drilled on the man overboard scenario, especially at night. The #1 rule is prevention. The absolute failure to ensure his inexperienced wife was harnessed to the boat or wearing a life jacket, especially in open waters after dark, it suggests one of two things: staggering, criminal negligence, or
Far more likely, a deliberate setup.
a deliberate setup.
So Bennett claims he was awakened in the early morning hours of May 15th, about 6 hours later, by a loud crashing underneath. He rushes on deck, finds the sails loose, rigging flapping, helm unmanned, and Isabella gone.
And that is the moment the behavioral evidence starts to pile up, which takes us right into the 45 minutes that raised all the suspicion.
Right. A true accident demands a frantic, desperate reaction focused entirely on recovery and rescue.
And Bennett provided the exact opposite.
This segment of time, those 45 minutes immediately following the alleged crash, it is the absolute linchpin of the prosecution's case. Every single action Bennett took contradicted standard maritime emergency training he explicitly possessed.
We really need to detail these omissions because they speak volumes about his state of mind. Faced with the immediate life-or-death crisis of his wife missing at sea, Bennett did not do the following. He could not recall if he even called out for her.
He couldn't recall.
Couldn't recall. He did not deploy the parachute flares he had readily available.
Wait, let's stop on the flares for a second. He had unexpended parachute flares, which are specifically designed to illuminate the water and the sails at night, and he didn't use them to search for the person who was most likely drowning right next to the boat.
Precisely. In a genuine man-overboard situation at night, deploying those flares is an immediate, automatic muscle memory response. You do it to maximize the chances of a visual recovery. To keep them stored is to consciously choose not to search.
And he didn't use the catamaran itself? Or the dinghy?
He admitted it. He didn't use the catamaran or the attached dinghy, a far safer, smaller vessel that could be quickly deployed to conduct any search patterns whatsoever.
That is just unconscionable. The dinghy is the first tool you use to search the immediate area, and he didn't immediately activate any emergency equipment or use the satellite phone for help. So what did Lewis Bennett do for those crucial 45 minutes?
He is systematically loading the life raft.
Loading the life raft!
This is the ultimate prioritization of possessions over the life of his wife. While Isabella's life was slipping away in the darkness, Bennett was executing a controlled evacuation checklist.
We have to look at the telling inventory of what he secured before he abandoned ship. This is the psychological insight the source material provides into his mindset. It's just stunning.
The list is astonishingly materialistic and self-serving. He secured a suitcase, 2 duffel bags, a backpack, 14 gallons of water, radio transmitter buoys, food, and most incredibly, a tea set.
A tea set. In an urgent maritime emergency, when the boat is sinking and your spouse is gone, a tea set makes the cut. That is not the inventory of a panicked survivor.
No, it's the packing list of someone who is planning to be comfortable on a raft until their pre-planned rescue arrives. It confirms his state of mind was not reactive, but executive. He wasn't desperately scanning the waves, he was carefully curating his survival kit.
But the true smoking gun, the element that sealed the investigation into the underlying theft and deception, was what the rescue swimmer later noted was unusually heavy in his backpack.
That was the stolen treasure. 9 plastic tubes containing 225 stolen silver coins, valued at $4,200.
So he saved stolen currency before he even thought about initiating a search for his wife or calling for emergency assistance.
Think about that sequence. 45 minutes ensuring he has his valuables, his comfort items, and his stolen loot. Only after securing all of this did he cut the line tethering the life raft to the sinking catamaran, abandon ship, and finally call for help at 1:30 a.m. on May 15th.
He was found by a Coast Guard helicopter at 4:30 a.m., 26 nautical miles west of Kelb Bank in the Bahamas. And the rescue swimmer who physically assisted him noted the weight of that backpack immediately.
He did. And when Coast Guard officials later debriefed him, trying to understand the man overboard sequence, he delivered the single most chilling line of the entire case.
When they asked him what he had done to search for his wife,
Bennett's answer was, "I did not do anything."
just flat, I did not do anything.
It's a statement that eliminates any possibility of remorse or even accidental involvement in that moment. It suggests Total cold detachment.
And the Coast Guard, at this point unaware of his calculated indifference, they immediately launched this massive, exhaustive search operation.
The effort was enormous. 4 grueling days, 137 hours of searching, covering over 4,980 square nautical miles. That area is larger than some small countries.
A massive commitment of resources, tragically for a woman who was almost certainly murdered hours before they even knew she was missing.
The search was suspended at 8:45 p.m. on May 18th. And here we pivot to the next major behavioral red flag.
Yeah.
The speed at which Bennett sought to formalize Isabella's death.
The very next day, May 19th, Bennett contacted the Coast Guard for a letter of presumed death.
An FBI agent later noted that this timing was extremely early for a husband who would normally want his wife to be found alive. It signals a priority on paperwork and inheritance, not grief or hope.
This cold transactional behavior just solidified the suspicions that had already started to mount based on his survival inventory and his lack of a search. But suspicion isn't proof.
No, it's not. That proof came when investigators shifted their focus from Bennett's suspicious behavior to the concrete, physical evidence provided by the sunken surf into summer.
And this moves us into the forensic truth of it all. This is where the nautical architecture experts entered the picture and just demolished Bennett's entire narrative of a loud crashing underneath.
The partially sunken catamaran was located during the search effort, and it was secured by the FBI and the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service. When forensic experts began examining the photographic and video evidence of the vessel's damage, they realized pretty quickly it did not align with the collision.
The damage, they said, appeared to have been inflicted from inside the boat.
Right, and for listeners who aren't familiar, a catamaran is a vessel with 2 parallel hulls. They're generally extremely stable and designed to be highly buoyant.
And that dual hull design is absolutely key here, isn't it?
It's everything. Investigators found holes in both hulls, and these holes were located in nearly identical symmetrical locations.
That is just conceptually staggering. A single collision with an object at sea, say a rogue shipping container or a piece of debris, it cannot possibly create symmetrical damage on both sides of a dual-hulled vessel at the same time.
It defies physics. It's impossible. To verify this conclusion, the Coast Guard consulted an associate professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. The expert's testimony was the death blow to the accident theory.
The key forensic finding wasn't just the holes, but the intentional compromise of the boat's primary sealing mechanisms. The expert found that 2 underwater escape hatches were open.
And these are not just small access ports. These hatches, when opened, they cause rapid flooding. To use an analogy, it's like your car having 2 emergency drain plugs, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger's side below the waterline. You would only open them in a controlled, simultaneous way if you intended to sink the vehicle quickly and permanently.
And the expert's conclusion was unequivocal. He said, it does not appear the vessel sinking was caused by accidental damage. Rather, it appears the vessel was intentionally scuttled.
Scuttled. Deliberately sunk. The professor noted that the opening of both escape hatches was, quote, unexplainable as an accident and defies prudent seamanship. He stated he could not conceive of a single external impact that would accidentally cause symmetrical holes in both hulls at roughly the same time and simultaneously open the escape hatches.
So Bennett's story of being awakened by a crash was a complete fabrication. He was, according to the physical evidence, the agent of the crash. He methodically ensured the vessel would sink quickly after Isabella was overboard.
He was eliminating the physical crime scene itself and creating a scenario that was consistent with an unrecoverable man-overboard tragedy.
And this evidence of calculated destruction links perfectly back to all the other calculated actions. The lack of safety gear, the non-search, and the immediate prioritization of his valuables.
Including those stolen coins.
Let's delve further into those stolen coins, because they establish this crucial pattern of criminal deception that really supports the motive of financial gain.
So 1 month after Isabella's disappearance, on June 16, 2017, the FBI executed a search warrant on the couple's Delray Beach condo. 20 agents spent over 8 hours meticulously searching the property.
And they found a secondary cache of stolen goods hidden in boat shoes in the master bedroom closet. 162 gold coins.
And these coins were part of a much larger $100,000 stash of gold and silver that had been stolen a year prior, in May 2016, from a yacht called the Kitty R while Bennett was working as first mate.
So this is critical. He wasn't just transporting stolen goods. He was a serial thief who had filed a false police report claiming burglary for that original theft.
He was the one who stole the $100,000. He had been living this double life of deceit for over a year.
So when we connect all the marital and financial dots, the chronic debt, the refusal to compromise on Amelia's location, the pattern of deceit, and the eventual calculated destruction of the vessel, the investigators concluded Bennett's motives were chillingly clear.
The murder solved three problems simultaneously for him. One, the immediate end of the toxic marital strife for their argument over location. Two, securing Isabella's estate through inheritance. And three, gaining sole, uncontested custody of Amelia, allowing him to immediately execute his plan to raise her in Australia. It was a complete control shift.
This deep dive now has to shift to the sheer coldness of Bennett's post-incident actions and the devastating impact on Isabella's family. We already mentioned the extremely early request for the death certificate, but his demeanor upon returning to Florida was noted by everyone.
Isabella's sister, Diana, she recounted seeing him after the Coast Guard search was called off. She described him as utterly calm, stating he wasn't crying or anything.
Not crying.
No. She said when she hugged him and asked where Isabella was, his response was a completely flat, I don't. No emotion, no grief, just detachment. This lack of appropriate distress is a classic behavioral red flag noted by law enforcement.
And this controlled coldness, it just culminated in this heartbreaking confrontation just 2 weeks after the disappearance on May 28, 2017. Bennett showed up at Isabella's family's Boca Raton home with a police officer.
Right. Ostensibly to retrieve belongings. A laptop, an iPad, and the engagement ring.
But the police officer was wearing a body camera, and that 9-minute recording became some of the most powerful, raw, emotional evidence in the entire case. It documented the sheer, overwhelming grief and suspicion of the family confronting the man they believed murdered their sister and daughter.
The scene described is just agonizing. Bennett had already placed 10-month-old Amelia in his car, preparing to leave the country permanently with her. Isabella's mother, Amparo, you can see her on the footage, collapsing to the ground, just pleading with Bennett not to take the baby away from them.
And the family's grief, it just turns into this screaming accusation. Isabella's sister, Elizabeth, confronted him directly, screaming her suspicions. You already killed my sister! What else do you want? Now you want to kill my mom. That is what you want now.
That raw, unedited despair just encapsulates the family's absolute conviction that this was murder from the start.
The police officer who was there, sensing the complete collapse of the family and the overwhelming emotional stress, he made a compassionate suggestion. He suggested Bennett show a small act of kindness, allow the family to hold Amelia one last time before he left.
And Bennett's response? It defined his cruelty. It defined his total lack of empathy or humanity toward his late wife's grieving family. He looked at the officer and said, I don't think that's right.
I don't think that's right.
He refused their final opportunity to hold the baby, proving his intention to sever all emotional ties permanently.
And the very next day, his final act of calculated flight was executed. Bennett purchased one-way tickets to the United Kingdom and flew there with Amelia, effectively cutting off all contact with Isabella's family and completing his ultimate objective.
These actions, the refusal to search, saving the stolen property, the immediate request for a death certificate, fleeing the country with the child, it all provided an undeniable foundation for the murder investigation that followed, despite the crime happening so far offshore.
Okay, so let's move to the subsequent legal labyrinth. Bennett was initially apprehended upon returning to the U.S. in August 2017, but it was on a far simpler charge, transporting stolen goods, those coins in his backpack. He served 7 months for that.
Right. But the FBI was relentlessly building the murder case, synthesizing all the behavioral red flags and that damning forensic evidence from the scuttled boat. On February 20, 2018, they arrested him on second-degree murder charges.
And the affidavit was clear. FBI Special Agent James Kelly explicitly submitted there was probable cause to believe that Louis Richard Bennett knowingly and unlawfully killed Isabella Hellmann with malice aforethought.
With the expert analysis proving the deliberate scuttling, the prioritizing of coins, and the calculated flight, the evidence was just overwhelming. Bennett initially pleaded not guilty, but his legal team, they had to recognize the strength of the forensic case, and they began negotiating a plea deal with prosecutors.
This brings us to the controversial plea deal agreed upon on November 5, 2018. Bennett changed his plea from second-degree murder to involuntary manslaughter.
And this decision was met with profound opposition from Isabella's family. They remain convinced, and still are, that he deliberately murdered her, likely by pushing her overboard and then sinking the evidence.
So why did the prosecution agree to this reduction? It goes back to that unique challenge of prosecuting murder on the high seas.
The prosecutors cited the inherent challenges of proving premeditated murder or malice aforethought beyond a reasonable doubt in a nautical environment, where establishing the exact minute-by-minute timeline and method of the killing is almost impossible without a body.
So that difficulty essentially forced their hand.
It did. While the forensic evidence proved the sinking was intentional, and therefore a crime proving the precise, premeditated act of murder at sea, where jurisdiction is often complex, would have been a high-risk gamble at trial. The plea deal guaranteed a conviction.
And a maximum sentence of 8 years for involuntary manslaughter rather than risking an acquittal on the murder charge. They took the sure thing.
They took the sure thing.
The sentencing took place on May 28, 2019, before U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno. Bennett actually read an apology, claiming he was truly sorry. He even asked for a reduced sentence of 7 years so he could be reunited sooner with Amelia.
Judge Moreno, thankfully, was completely unmoved by this self-serving apology. He sentenced Bennett to the maximum allowed under the plea deal, 8 years in federal prison, plus 3 years of supervised release, and crucially $22,910 in restitution directed to Amelia.
And Judge Moreno made a powerful statement during that sentencing, directly acknowledging the family's deep-seated belief and their pain. He stated clearly, the family of the decedent will never acknowledge that it was involuntary.
Bennett, perhaps realizing the judge was not going to give him any quarter, he waived his right to appeal the sentence.
And despite the staggering tragedy and the years of malice, a beautiful and powerful act of grace emerged from Isabella's family regarding Amelia. Judge Moreno had strongly encouraged cooperation between the two families.
He did. And in June 2019, shortly after the sentencing, Isabella's family made the difficult, emotional journey to Edinburgh, Scotland, to see Amelia for the first time since she was just 10 months old. A necessary and heartbreaking reunion.
Mitchell Catraser, who represented Isabella's family, he articulated their extraordinary commitment. He noted that they had made the profoundly difficult decision to forgive Bennett.
Not for his sake.
No, not for his sake at all, but because Amelia needed access to both sides of her family to thrive without her mother. Catraser said, she's lost her mom, but that doesn't mean that she's lost her mom's family.
That level of compassion in the face of such cold-blooded calculation is truly remarkable.
It's astounding. Today, Amelia, who is now 9 years old, lives with Bennett's parents in Scotland, but maintains regular, loving contact with Isabella's family.
As for Lewis Bennett, he's expected to be released and deported back to the UK sometime between 2026 and 2027. He will have served the time for the loss of Isabella's life, a sentence that many, including her family, feel is utterly inadequate for the calculated actions proven by the forensic evidence.
In synthesizing this deep dive, the story of Isabella Hellmann is just this haunting study in contrasts. The contrast between the life she built, defined by love and dedication to her daughter, and the calculated malice of the man who ended it.
And it's the contrast between Bennett's narrative of a high-seas tragedy and the undeniable physical proof of a meticulously engineered shipwreck. We saw calculated indifference prioritizing a tea set and stolen gold over the life of his wife.
And that stark reality that the facts, from the unactivated emergency beacon to the deliberate scuttling of the vessel, paints such a clear picture of planning and motive, it really highlights a key legal challenge.
It does. Even with overwhelming forensic proof of intentional destruction, proving premeditated murder on the open sea where the crime scene is literally fluid remains a formidable hurdle for justice.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Though the legal system settled on involuntary manslaughter, the recovery of the scuttled vessel and the subsequent expert analysis provided forensic clarity where human testimony failed. Consider what this case reveals about the limitations of justice when jurisdiction and the element of malice aforethought are obscured by the vastness of the ocean.
And how sometimes the most compelling witness is the physical debris left behind. The physical proof of that scuttled boat spoke volumes where Lewis Bennett attempted to use the silence of the sea to cover his crime. It's a powerful reminder of how forensic engineering can overcome the tyranny of distance and deceit to expose the undeniable truth.
A truly harrowing and complex case. Thank you for diving into the source material with us. We'll be back soon with more of the deep dive.